Hello and welcome to this week's video. My name is Anuska Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me. And today's topic is all about expression, one of my favorite topics, something that pretty much every speaker I work with wants to work on in our coaching together. So if you perceive your voice to be monotone, to be boring, to be droning, this is the video for you. Now, maybe you've had some feedback that it sounds boring and monotone, or maybe you've just listened back to a recording and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe how bored I am listening to myself. So this is the video for you. Now, before I get going, if you haven't yet subscribed, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I release weekly videos on all things voice related, specifically aimed at professionals who want to maximize, enhance, and optimize their speaking voice. And also, if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to like, comment, and share. And underneath all my videos in the description box, there are all the links if you want to explore ways you can work with me, whether you are ready to make the ultimate investment in yourself in my 8-month program, or I have a couple of online courses as well. So covering all budgets. So let's get going then today and talk about expression. Now, most likely, if you perceive your voice to be monotone and boring when you listen to it, that it's probably lacking a variety. There's a lack of variety in your voice. And specifically around pitch, you probably live in a very narrow pitch range in your voice. With volume, you probably just have one volume for everything. And also, I'm not going to address this in this video, but I want to mention this up front. There's also likely to be a lack of pausing and variation of pace. So it's just, I speak at the same pace, I don't really pause, I have the same pitch, and I don't really vary my volume. So for me as a voice coach, pausing and pace is really important, but it comes after pitch and volume. Because if you just start pausing and playing around with your pace, but you haven't addressed the volume and the pitch, your voice is still going to sound boring. It's still going to sound monotone. But when you combine all of them, when you get really, really good at varying your pitch, at varying your volume, and then you start to pace your words, add pauses where it really enhances and adds more meaning to your words, that's when you become incredibly powerful. The other thing I just want to say as well around variety in the voice, because that's what this is all about. The human ear loves variety. We love anything that's different. So not only will your audience respond to your voice when there's more variety, but also your actual physical voice will function better, will be a happier voice. If you live in a very narrow range and a very narrow place in your voice, 24 hours a day, that is putting a lot of load on your voice in a particular part of your voice. So this is why I talk all the time about warming your voice up. We're getting things moving. And also when you do warm your voice up, you're going to find it easier to access different pitches. If you live in a very narrow range in your voice all the time, and then you suddenly want to start varying your pitch, it's going to feel like quite a big jump. So warming your voice up is really important for lots and lots of reasons. But just to know, variety in the voice is not just about engaging your audience. Your voice will work better. So it's a win-win for everyone. If your voice is monotone, most likely there is a lack of pitch variation and volume. And that is what I want to focus on today. As I say, we don't want to ignore the pace and the pauses, but for me, that comes second. Now, many people do this very intuitively. They don't have a problem with this. It just very, very naturally comes to them. But for others, it's more challenging. And most likely, if you're watching this video, you fall into the latter category. And I'm also a singing teacher. And a lot of what I'm talking about today, if you listen to any singers or if you sing yourself, a lot of this is what we do when we sing. So whether you officially sing or not, whether you consider yourself a singer or not, we can all sing. So even if you just start to play around with this, sing in the car, just start to notice some of these things we're going to talk about today, because we do it very naturally with singing. But for some reason, when we come to speaking, we feel we have to shut the voice down and we're not allowed to be expressive. actually brings me on to my final point before I get going, which is your psychology, your mind drives your voice. And so if you have any conflict around expression from childhood, from your culture, from your family, whatever, you are going to find this really, really challenging. So you do need to also explore what is the emotional payoff for me in not being expressive. How do I protect myself? How does this keep me safe when I'm not expressive? And this is where the shadow work comes in. This is why in my private coaching, we explore the emotional side of the voice as well as the physical side, because they really go hand in hand. You will find it really hard to create lasting change in your voice if you don't address why in the first place you haven't allowed your voice to be expressive, because your true authentic voice is expressive. So I just want to make that really, really clear. So people that are naturally expressive, they have become masters, whether it's very intuitive or they've learnt at using emphasis. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the building blocks of words first of all, because what we want to understand is it's not just about emphasizing specific words in sentences, specific ideas, keywords in sentences, which is really important, but it's also starting to see that every word that has more than one syllable will have a stressed syllable and an unstressed syllable. And you naturally know this, you naturally learn this when you pick up your native language. Obviously, I'm talking about English here, but you could apply this to your native language as well. This is sort of how we learn to speak. We learn where the stress goes on a specific word, because actually when we stress it differently, it kind of doesn't make sense. And that's why this is really important. But it becomes more then about how you stress the word and how you vary that is going to make your voice more expressive or not. So let me give you a couple of examples of two-syllable words, one where the stress is at the front, one where the stress is at the end, and then I'll also give you a couple of examples of three-syllable words. So first of all, a two-syllable word, morning. The emphasis is on the front of that word, morning. If I was to go morning, you might think I was a bit weird. Morning. So the emphasis, the stress goes on the front of that word. Now, another example where the stress goes on the end of the word is today. So if I went today, you would think I was a bit weird. Today, we naturally will put the stress on the end of that word. So there's just very, very simple examples. Now, three-syllable words, transformation, one of my favorite words. So the stress on that word goes on the end, transformation. If I was to say transformation, you might think I was a bit weird, or transformation. Also, you might think I was a bit weird. So the stress goes on the end of that word, transformation. Now, that's not to say you don't put any stress on any of the other syllables, but the bulk of the stress goes on the end of that word, transformation. Another example, superstar. So stress goes on the beginning of that word, superstar. I don't go superstar, for example, or superstar. It's superstar. So you will naturally do this already, but you may never have thought about it. Now, in terms of expression, then, it's how you put the emphasis on those stressed syllables and how you vary it that's going to make the difference in your speaking. So there are three main ways that we can vary that. The first is pitch variation. So we can speak higher, we can speak lower. The second is we can vary the volume on it. And the third is we can lengthen the vowel. So I'm going to just give you some examples on each of those. Now, you might use all of them, or you might use pitch and volume, very common to combine a higher pitch with more volume, but you don't have to. So this is where you can really start to play around with this and make it make sense with what you're saying. So let me give you an example of pitch. So if you were to raise your pitch, for example, you might do that on something like the word morning. So good morning, everyone. And that would seem quite a natural thing to do. If I was to vary the volume on something, I might take the word welcome, for example, and on the word welcome, the start of that word has the stressed syllable, welcome, welcome. And I might put more volume behind that, welcome. Now, of course, as I say, you might combine volume and pitch together. Welcome, everyone. So you could absolutely do that, but you don't have to. You can isolate volume and pitch, or you could put them together. So the final one is elongating vowels, which is a big part of singing. And so if you are a singer, you'll probably find this a little bit easier. But if you're not a singer, you can play around with this anyway and just start to lengthen vowels and notice what it does to your words. So for example, if I was to say superstar, superstar versus superstar, 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 you're a superstar, superstar. Like, play around with this because it really is. This is where your voice becomes really expressive. As I say, it's not just about specific syllables in individual words. It's then also in an entire sentence. Where do I put the emphasis on specific words? And again, you can then utilize the pitch, the volume, and the elongation in that as well. So for example, if I was to say, on Sunday, I'm going for a hike. So you could play around with this. On Sunday, I'm going for a hike, because the key words for me in that sentence are Sunday and a hike. Everything else is important, but not as important. So that is where I would put the emphasis. On Sunday, I'm going for a hike. Or on Sunday, I'm going for a hike. So there's many, many ways you could play around with this. And obviously then you want to start to make this make sense with what you're saying. It's got to sound natural. It's not that you're just now randomly emphasizing certain stressed syllables just because I've told you to. You want this to make sense. And I honestly think the more you practice this, if this doesn't come naturally to you, a few things you can do other than play around with this in your voice, which I think is really important. First of all, listen to great speakers. Listen to people who naturally do this and notice what they do. Now, again, we're not wanting to copy them because we've got to find our own authentic voice, but it does help us. It's like when we learn to sing. We mimic to start with. We listen to great singers and we mimic. Every great singer in the world has mimicked other singers to start with. That is where we all start. So if you're struggling with this, listen to people that you perceive to be very expressive and just start to pay attention to what are they emphasizing? What are they stressing? How are they stressing it? What words are they putting more emphasis on? And start to question, why is this engaging? Why is this interesting to my ear? So listen to great speakers. The other thing you can do as well, regardless of whether you consider yourself a singer or not, I am a singing teacher and I can tell you that only about 2% of the population are truly tone deaf. So even if you don't want to sing in front of anyone else, sing in your car and just get used to moving your voice around, playing with the pitch, playing with lengthening vowels, playing with varying volume, because all of that is actually what we do as singers. We do it very naturally because that's what we've only ever known. But for some reason, when it comes to speaking, it all goes out of the window and I've just got to shut my voice down and I cannot be expressive. So you can also pretend to sing something. Just go really over the top, play like a character. You know, I'm not suggesting you actually go into a meeting and you sing your way through it, but you might want to, but just start to bring some of that sing-songness into your speaking when you are practicing, because it just starts to break you open, get you out of those conditioned patterns with your voice. And the final one, which I have given to clients in the past, if you are someone that loves poetry, sometimes it's easier to practice this reading poetry. Just take a poem and just start to play around with the colors in your voice reading poetry. So read some poetry or read a story. Read something where you feel less ridiculous, bringing more expression into your voice, and start there. So it's really a two-part process then. So one part of this is you listen to great speakers and you start to pay attention to what makes them great. Where do they emphasize? Where do they elongate vowels? How do they vary their pitch and the volume? What are they doing with their voice? Just start to pay attention. read some poetry, read a story, particularly children's stories, which encourage more expression and creativity. And also, as I say, it doesn't matter whether you're a singer or not, just start to bring a bit more sing-songness into your speaking voice when you're practicing. But the other part of this is also then starting to record yourself. Take a paragraph, a couple of sentences of something that you want to practice with, and start to look at in the sentence, underline where the stressed syllables are, underline the key words in the sentence, and start to vary the pitch, the volume, and lengthen those vowels and start to play around with it. Now, when you get really good at it, then you can start to add the pace and the pauses, etc. But I think for the moment, really just focus on the pitch, the volume, and lengthening vowels, because that's probably more than enough if you are not used to doing this. Thank you so much. I hope this has been really helpful. I know for people, as I said at the start, this can be really challenging, particularly if you haven't come from a singing or an acting background. This might not come naturally to you. And particularly if you have been taught implicitly or explicitly, it's not okay, it's not safe to express yourself, you're also going to find this hard. So I am here if you are ready to really invest in yourself and you are serious about taking the next step in your career, and you know that your voice really is hindering you, because an expressive voice is so important if you want people to engage with you. So this is not about making you sound like someone else. This is about you finding your own unique expression, and your authentic voice is an expressive voice. So I will leave you with that, but any comments or questions, please post them below, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching.